Welcome everyone to another episode of Coffee Talks. Today we have a very special guest, Rob Stull, three-time Olympian from Modern Pentathlon and also fencing. He's going to tell us his story about that too. And he's the CEO of USA Modern Pentathlon, the national governing body for the sport in the US. Welcome, Rob, and thank you for joining us today.
Ronnie, thanks for having me. I've got my coffee right here. I'm good to go. I know it's a little late where you are, but
Cheers.
Exactly. Pleasure to be here for the Cartan Global and the Coffee Talks series, and let's have some fun.
Well, thank you again, Rob, for being here and looking forward for this conversation. So first I want to start asking you, how did you get into practicing modern pentathlon? I mean, you grew up in the U.S. For where most of the young kids play sports such as football, basketball, baseball. Could you please tell me about that? How did you get into modern pentathlon?
Well, every young American man, and I was no exception. We have an option. You know, it's either football, baseball, basketball, or pentathlon. Those are your four options in America. So, and I signed up for pentathlon. Now, okay, all jokes aside, you're right. It's not the thing that most kids do. They say, I want to grow up and be a pentathlete. But believe it or not, pentathlon in terms of appeal, it has millions of people because of the 5 events, right? And I first found out about pentathlon. My roommate in university was a guy named Duncan Goodhue. Very brief. I had a lot of roommates. In school a long time. But Duncan was Olympic champion in Moscow in the 100 breast, and he was a little older than me. And the Brits had won in '76, so he knew everything there was to know about pentathlon, considering, and when you win a gold medal, your country tends to understand what that sport is. So the British, with Jeremy Fox and so forth, had that gold medal, and I was a decent runner, not because I was super fast, but I was a good runner relative to swimmers. So most swimmers are fairly gravity impaired, and so you can put one leg in front of the other, left, right, then sign you up. So he's the one who told me. He said, "Listen, you're a good runner as well as a swimmer." And in those days, triathlon, which is what you might think of today, like a good run swimmer might go to triathlon, right? It's a well-known sport, but we're much older than triathlon. And in those days, triathlon was like 10 guys on a beach in Waikiki. That's what triathlon was in 1979 when I found out about this. So he pointed me in the direction. I grew up on a farm where we raised horses. I ran track in high school and so forth. I swam at a collegiate level at a Division I school. When you grow up on a farm like I did, you learn how to hunt. And as you know, every American has 7 or 8 guns. And I'm kidding. That's another joke. But you growing up on a farm, you do learn to hunt. So I was a hunter with my father and so forth. So I was familiar with that. And the one thing I hadn't done was fencing. And heck, I didn't know what fencing was. I knew what sword fighting was, but I didn't know what fencing was. So fencing to me means you put a post in the ground, you put some wire on it, and you keep the cows in. But obviously at the Olympic world, sword fighting is what I was talking about. I was interested in the old black and white pirate movies, so like Errol Flynn, which is probably way before your time. But some of the coolest things
Caribbean, I know that's the one from our time.
There you go. Well, yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. So that's what I was interested in. I like that kind of stuff, swinging on ropes and landing on horses and hope they don't run away. And so when I got into the sport, the one thing I hadn't done ended up being my best event. So the fencing part of it, the sword fighting part of it, really was something that I took to kind of naturally. And I was very fortunate, very lucky in that regard. And that was the key. If I hadn't been a successful fencer, I wouldn't have been able to have been a decent pentathlete down the road. And I showed up. There's a big military tie with pentathlon. There still is to this day around the world. And our first Olympic representative was a guy named George Patton, who was a lieutenant at the time. And he became famous in World War II as Blood and Guts Patton. The 3-star general. And he was our first athlete in the 1912 Olympics in Stockholm. So there's always been a strong military relationship, and still is around the world, and still is in the United States. 75% of our Tokyo team right now is military, is active duty military. So it has that strong relationship. And I think that's common, actually, especially outside the U.S. As you go from country to country, how do athletes support themselves? It's oftentimes through the police or through the military. Like in Italy, for example, the Carabinieri, a lot of the pentathletes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
are there. You know, I mean, and it's not unique to pentathlon, but something for your viewers or the people who, you know, certainly the Americans, up through the early 1960s, I mean, equestrian sports. So, right, the cavalry, you know, that the equestrian sports was all through the military because of their horsemanship going back, you know, many decades, even hundreds of years. So, I mean,
No, it makes sense now that you say it. I mean, I haven't thought about it, but now what you say it makes sense. So, but like out of the 5 sports in modern pentathlon, so you would say fencing was your strongest one. Was that your favorite one as well, or because that was
interesting? I used to, you know, over the years, and I've been doing this 40 years from an athlete to an administrator. I've been in this a long time. I'm dating myself here, but I heard David Svoboda, who's Olympic champion in London, a Czech Republic athlete. He was here visiting us. We have a lot of athletes come to the Olympic Training Center and you know, to train, obviously. And David was talking to a group of kids, and somebody asked him that question. They said, "What's your favorite of the 5?" And Svoboda said, "What do you mean, what's my favorite?" He goes, "I'm a pentathlete. My sport is pentathlon. It's 5 events." So in my tip of the hat, my homage to David Svoboda, I'm going to say, yeah, I like them all equally. We're pentathletes, all that. But to your point, probably, you know, certainly the one I was most successful and most known for was my fencing. I did quite well with that. And I came from a swimming background. But what I enjoy the most today is probably the horses. I enjoy going out for a ride, grabbing a horse and, you know, putting on a mask, you know, the COVID thing, robbing a bank and then grabbing the horse and taking off. So no, I'm kidding about the bank. but yes, I enjoy the equestrian part just because I was in Italy in the early 1980s on a way to a competition in a bus full of guys, and I saw this older man with his horse and his dog, you know, on this nice, easy canter through the woods, this Italian, just outside of Rome, this beautiful area. And I looked at that, and this guy looked like he was in his mid-70s, that kind of thing, and having a great old time early in the morning. And I thought, that's all I want out of life. That's all I need. Just give me a horse and a dog and a beautiful morning, and I'm a happy guy. So I'm well on my way.
The relationship with animals, you know, that it's the connection that we have, especially with dogs and horses, you know, that's
sure special. It's like, you know, exactly. It's like bread and butter, dogs and horses.
Yeah. Well, nice. And well, going back to fencing, because you said that's where you actually, that made you a great pentathlete. Let's go back to your first national championship in '89 in Orlando, correct?
Wow, you've done your research.
No, just
catching it on reruns.
There's a keyword there, a wink and a girlfriend there on the '89. What happened there? What's the story there?
You really have done your homework, Ronnie. So it's men's epee, you know, and epee is the 3 musketeers sword, right? You know, the beautiful part about that weapon, because there's 3, right? Foil, saber, and epee. In epee, which just means sword in French, it's what the word epee means. The rules are, there aren't any rules. That's the cool part about it. And I'm obviously exaggerating, but there are very few rules. You basically have to hit the guy before he hits you. And it's the dueling sword, right? And in men's epee, you could hit a guy in the foot, you can hit him in the hand, you can hit him in the mask, anywhere on the body, because it comes back from the time of a duel. So the wink and the girl. That's the final is and again, I was really a pentathlete, but I had made the final many times, but this was my chance to win. And I mean, it was, even in '85, we got a bronze at the World Championships, but I had never won the individual title. And I'm standing up there on the stage, you know, and time goes out, so it's time is expired. So the score, it goes to sudden death. One touch, all the marbles, and my girlfriend at the time was sitting in the front row, and there's a lot of folks, surprisingly. No, we got decent crowds, but I turned and she's there, and everybody's on edge because there was a big rivalry between the New York Athletic Club and USA Pentathlon, two big clubs in that sport. I just turned to her and I just winked, like, I got this I got this, we're good. I got this. And that's
How old were you at the time?
Pardon?
How old were you at the time?
I was 27, almost 28. So moving on to my 28th birthday, but I and I had been top 4, I don't know how many times, but here was the chance to win. Like I said, I just turned, I winked at her, and that was all it took. She just relaxed. She just smiled, and 6 seconds later, I won my first national championships. And the irony of that winks are a big part of my life, by the way. So I'm in Portugal. We draw for horses in pentathlon, right? You don't know what horse you're gonna get. You literally, it's a random thing, and that's the idea is to test the rider's ability, not the horses. Your ability to adapt to a variety of different types of horses, right? Horses are like people, different personalities, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I was in Portugal. I drew this horse. I go back to the barn to, put a saddle on him and, get ready for the competition. And I was in a good position to win this competition. And I walk into the stall. The horse turns his head around, and he gives me, I swear to God, a big wink. He just looks at me and winks. And I went out and I bet all my friends, all the other guys in the competitions. I took all comers. I'm going to win this, promise you. And I gave odds. It was like, whatever. I knew I had it in the bag. I also knew that I could do anything with that horse. In other words, he would respond. He would turn on a dime. He would do anything I asked. And that's exactly what happened. But I will never forget. It was almost surreal. He turns his head back, looks at me, and gives me a wink, a one-eyed wink, like, we got this.
It's the sign of confidence, like I got it,
like, no sweat. We got this.
Nice.
Exactly.
Well, and that got you through, like, participating in 2 sports in an Olympic Games back in '88, correct?
88 was the Seoul Games was interesting for me for lots of levels, and yes, I was able to qualify for, and the U.S. Olympic team is a strong Olympic team, and I don't care what the sport is. We field people. Our athletes go to the games to win medals. Our athletes go. It's tough. So I was fortunate enough to make it as a fencer and as a pentathlete, and that was. I guess in the history, there's been about 6 guys that have done that over the course, over time. It doesn't happen. It's been a long time since it's happened in modern day. Back,
what are the other guys or the other disciplines that they participate?
There was one that I really want to mention is a gentleman by the name of Wolf Wigo, W-I-G-O, Wolf. He doubled in water polo and swimming. So there is a relationship there. But still, he was, water polo is a lot more than just swimming, right? And so Wolf was a sprinter, and I think Wolf did it I want to say he did it in '96. I want to say he did, which is, relatively recent. And so that was really quite the accomplishment. It wasn't, the few guys that have done it prior to that were typically in the 1930s, 1920s, where it was, the Olympics were different than they are today. It was really more truly the amateur, truly more of a.
Yeah, these days it's not the same. Like, yeah.
No, exactly.
No.
But that was, I'll tell you, that was 16 days. The game's always, as you know, is 16 days long, and 11 days. I competed 11 of the 16 days. That's why I didn't. When I competed in Barcelona, I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just only doing pentathlon in Barcelona. I'm not going to double. So, and I have a gentleman on my staff now who actually did the marathon and the 10,000 meters in Athens, and he said the same thing. He's one of 3 athletes to do it: Galen Rupp, Frank Shorter, and Dan Brown. My gentleman is Dan Brown, and Dan's like, I'm glad I did it. Would never do it again.
Well, but you did it. Exactly, glad you did it. because that's history. I mean, it's like, there's other athletes that played multiple sports like Bo Jackson or well, Jordan played baseball too, and like that, and that's pretty special. I mean, to play to represent your country in two sports at an Olympic level, that's quite accomplishing. So
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It was an experience, and at the end of the day, Sammy Lee, who was a great Olympian, he was one of Greg Louganis's. I think he was actually Greg's first coach, the diver Greg Louganis, and Sammy won 2 gold medals. But I did some things when Sammy was working with Arnold Schwarzenegger with the President's Council on Physical Fitness, and we were at at Princeton University, at one of the schools around the Princeton area, just talking to kids. And Sammy's, he's not even 5 feet tall, and he passed away not too long ago, just a few years ago. But he was a surgeon, and a double gold medalist in '52, and a Korean American. But he would tell these young kids, he'd say, listen, in the Olympic movement, there's something for everyone, whether you're 4 foot, nothing tall, or whether you're, David Robinson and over 7 feet, or a guy like Schwarzenegger would walk in, and he's obviously, just built like a brick house. But there really is something for everyone on the Olympic program, and it's just a matter of being able to find it. To me, it's no surprise that a guy like Jordan would be great at baseball as well as golf, baseball, tennis, anything that's eye hand. And I get asked that a lot by parents, like, what should my kid do? What do you think? And I always say, just give them the tools, because they'll find their way. The tools are good heart, lungs, and good eye-hand coordination.
And it's like, I mean, the multiple sport, there's like the theory of, okay, stick to one sport, like Tiger Woods theory, like just stick to golf. Or there's the theory of Roger Federer, that he played soccer and other sports that actually make you better for other sports, like he did for tennis now. So yeah, that makes sense what you're saying, because I mean, if you play different sports, the eye range movement, or like if you use the same type of movements or muscles, if you play baseball, you can actually have a better golf swing as well. So
there's a lot of crossover
about that by David Epstein. I think it's called Range. It's pretty interesting book for those who
well, there's also, when you talk to somebody, and I've been fortunate enough in the U.S. Olympic movement and globally as well, you make friends, right? And people are people. So you make friends, and some of your friends are big famous athletes. But the reality is that when you go skiing with somebody like that, or you play tennis with Johnny Mack, or if you've learned how to teach, in other words, if you've been a student at a high level where your coach is instructing you, there's such a thing as being coachable. So these guys will tell you tricks. They'll give you little ideas. They will give you shortcuts. And once you understand the basics, it's sort of like going to school, and all, in your first years, it's just basics. Well, half of that is learning how to learn, right? So you can take any athlete, and well, maybe not any athlete. There's a couple I would really question, but in general, you could take most athletes and put them in an environment, and you can teach them how to do whatever it is, because they learned how to learn.
No, you're right. It's the basics, and they can apply to other sports. But yeah, then going back to like being Olympian and marching in an opening ceremony, what did you feel? What was the experience of like full stadium, or what's describe that? I mean, even because people, for example, that travel with Cartan, then I mean they're actually there in the opening ceremony. So what was your experience as an athlete of marching there?
Well, I love to talk to folks. First off, I think every human being on the planet should once in their life see the Olympic Games at the summer games, because they're so huge. It's the largest event on the planet. It's the greatest event on the planet, and it's something somebody told me this a long time ago, but I've never forgotten it. The games, as you well know, Ronnie, are the equivalent of hosting 30 Super Bowls a day in the same city for 16 days in a row. That's the size and scope of it. So it's just massive. But yet you don't feel you don't feel like you're lost in humanity. You know, I mean, it's just the greatest gathering of mankind, you know, every 4 years on the planet. So the opening ceremonies. My first opening ceremonies was Los Angeles in '84. And by the way, 25 years later, I was with Peter Ueberroth at lunch in New York because I was on the USOC's executive board and I was there for some other reason. And I was serving myself at the buffet line. I turned to Peter. I just said, listen, I want to thank you. He goes, for what? I go, for the opening ceremonies in 1984. It's 25 years late, but I did thank him. I mean, I knew what the Olympics were. My first recollection of the games was 1968, Mexico City. I saw it on a black and white television, you know, in a little town in Maryland. I was like 6 years old, you know, I mean, little kid. But I knew that that was something special. So all of a sudden, I'm, you know, they keep everybody sequestered away from everybody else, and then they march in by nation. The host country marches in last. So we marched through a tunnel, and there were these guys wearing all white, you know, high-fiving the team as we came by. These guys were American legends, you know, the Bruce Jenner, Al Order, John Neighbor, you know, big names from those days. And they were there. What I didn't know was they were there all dressed in white because they're going to walk in with the Olympic flag at that part of the ceremony. But we were just marching. You were just walking in as a group. Then we went through these turnstiles, right, that forced us into these lines of 8. Now we're now we're like a military unit, you know, coming, and we heard the announcer because we're in a tunnel, the same tunnel the marathoner comes through. We were pretty much organized shortest to tallest. So up front in the beginning of the team, I'm just talking about the whole U.S. team. In the beginning, you know, in the front were the gymnasts, you know, the smaller athletes in terms of height. And then at the back were the basketball players, you know, the volleyball guys, you know, these big 6'6" and higher, you know, and taller athletes in the back. But we're a unit of around 500 people. We're the host country, and we could hear the announcer going, you know, Uganda. So we're on the U's, and then we heard the announcer Zimbabwe, you know, with a Z. And then there was this right-hand turn, hard right-hand turn, and you could see that iconic shot of the LA Coliseum, you know, where the torch would be at the far end of the stadium. Beautiful afternoon, gorgeous. And it was, ladies and gentlemen, the United, and that was all we heard, because when that announcer said United, the entire stadium of 100,000 plus people just roared, absolutely roared. And we couldn't hear anything, you know, except this massive noise. Yeah. So we got out of line. It excited the team so much, we blew through the tunnel. And if you look at the film from that opening ceremonies and the U.S. team coming in, you're going to see this massive of athletes just literally running into the stadium, not like those old black and white pictures of guys marching in lines of 8 and saluting and all. That was not us.
Like a football team going out.
Yeah. It was so exciting. And they don't prepare you for that. They can't. You know, they being in the Olympic Committee, they try to prepare you for everything. It's very hard to prepare you for the excitement that you're going to experience. Yeah. I mean, you have pins. This game was the first games of the big pin trading, right? And I'm sure Cartan gives out pins to their clients and so forth. We were throwing things into the stands because those spectators, they didn't care if you were a big name, like in those days, like Carl Lewis who was one of the big heroes of those games, or if you're a guy like Rob Stull, somebody that they didn't know. But you threw your, you know, and by the way, those pins became so valuable because they were based on, you know, the supply and demand. Pentathlon being a small sport, we only had 4 guys on the team. Those things were like shagging $100 bills into the stadium. It was, I mean, I look back, I'm like, $100. You know, and I was, yeah, you can't. Extraordinary
becomes so valuable, and like, yeah, it makes you, I mean,
you're happy to share the experience. I mean, Kirk Douglas, you know, the movie star, was on the front row. I remember seeing him in the stands. He was ramrod straight when the United States flag went past. You know, Ed Burkus, who carried the flag for us, he was our flag bearer. And he's a big guy, and he stiff-armed it, you know, one arm. And had to have been the proudest moment of his life. But Kirk Douglas was, I just remember seeing that. Here's a guy like him, and you could not have been at more attention than he was. Yeah, it was a great, It was a great experience. I had the opportunity just this past weekend to talk to a number of U.S. senators who were here in Colorado Springs, and all of them said we would like the Olympic movement in the United States, because there's challenges a lot of people are facing, as you know, around the world. We want the LA 2028 games, games coming back to Los Angeles again. We want that to be a unifying thing. We want to unite the American people. And I can tell you that Ronald Reagan was the president in 1984, and this was one of the things that was a shot in the arm to the American people. Really exciting, and you didn't understand it as an athlete until much later.
No, and that's right. I mean, sport unites, and even Nelson Mandela said it, I think, as well. And sport is huge. But like marching in opening ceremony as an athlete, it's huge. Like I had a smaller experience in the Maccabi games, but it's really in Israel, which is 40,000 people stadium, which is similar, but not like an Olympic Games, of course. But being there as a fan as well, that you and I actually shared the experience in Lima in the Pan American Games. Remember?
Absolutely. Yeah, but I think for your experience in the Maccabean Games, I don't think that's any less than the Olympic Games. I think anytime you have, because I've been on many teams, whether it's Pan Am Games or World University or whatever, Olympic Games, it's very similar from one to another. The stage is still the stage, right? And you're on display. One little funny thing that I'll mention is as an opening ceremony thing. I didn't know where my parents were. My parents were certainly going to be in the stadium. I knew that they had tickets, but I didn't know where. So it was a beautiful sunny day, and my dad had a black umbrella, like your typical British umbrella you would have in a rainy day, the black one. And he put that umbrella up on the sunny day, and I'm looking all around the stadium, and there's that black umbrella up on the, I could see it, and he was the only guy in the entire stadium with a black umbrella. I could pick out my father, my mom and dad, which is, super
smart move
cool.
by your father there.
Yeah, it was smart. It was smart on his part. Yeah.
No, but yeah, like even as a fan, it's really nice to be in the stadium. Like when we were in Lima too, as well, it was a great experience. Great games in Lima too. Congrats to Pan Am Sports. But also like in Pyeongchang as well, we're marching the two Koreas marching together. And
Sure.
for people that want to go to the Olympic Games, as you said, at least go once, And Manuel Luna from the Dominican Republic that we had 2 weeks ago said the same thing. And you're right, like it's like undescribable, that feeling of being there, like you get the chills, and it's a great.
You feel like you're part of something so much bigger than yourself. And yes, it's about sport, and no, it's not about sport. I will say, there was a gentleman, he was the CFO of the IOC, Richard Cartan from Puerto Rico, IOC member from Puerto Rico. I was at an IOC meeting, and he was speaking, and he said the Olympics have nothing to do with sport. I thought, oh, this ought to be good. Where's he going to go from here? And he said the games are all about, the founders of the games wanted to spread the Olympic values. And they simply chose sport as a means to do that. And so when you understand that, and you look beyond, as you get a little age on you, and you get a little life experience, you realize what Coubertin said, the founder of the games, is so true. I mean, it's the glory is in the competition. It's great to win. We all want to win. We don't put Americans on the field that don't want to win. Everybody wants to win. But at the end of the day, it's the honor is to the man in the arena, and it's the glory of the competition. It's the experience. It's I've done 16 games, and some of my closest friends have been members of the Soviet team back in the Cold War days. We understood the geopolitics of the world, but on the other hand, we were friends, on the field of play, and are today. So
it's like sport unites, definitely, and. I mean, and that especially at that international level, and like sport is a really powerful platform to like communicate those values, and that takes me to like another question that I wanted to ask you is like, what are the core values that you have adopted in your life by being involved in the Olympic movement? Like we're talking about values now and how it's beyond sport. what are the main values that you've taken from sport to life in general?
Well, the IOC, Thomas Bach, the IOC president, made a speech in Doha last October, and I think it was ANOC, but anyway, I know it was in Doha.
General Assembly.
Yeah, okay, the General Assembly. So he made and it was a fascinating speech, because what he said was, if the IOC, the International Olympic Movement, was an entertainment business, we wouldn't have the sports that we have on the program. If we were a pure entertainment business, we would have different selection. If we would also have, we wouldn't have 207 national Olympic committees. We might have, 20 or 30. It would be basically the NBA. I mean, it'd be a very different animal. And what separates it is the values. The Olympics is about values, and human values. So friendship is one of those values, and I think friendship is particularly, as I'm going to celebrate my 60th birthday here in a couple of weeks, and so I'm looking forward to that. I made it this far. Nice. And
do you have any celebrations planned for that?
I do. I'm not sure any that I can leave on this show, but no, I'm going to head up to, we have a summer place up in Maine. I'm going to be with a few close friends, because COVID, see, like the Japanese, what do they have? They call it the 2020 games to be held in 2021. I believe that's what Tokyo is called now.
Yeah, 2020 plus one. Yeah.
2020 plus one. Okay. So for my birthday, I had planned this big blast, a big bash, and now I've decided it's going to be next year. So it's going to be 60 plus one. So I'm going to still have the party. It's just not going to be this year. So,
that's a good way.
But back to the values. The friendship to me is extraordinarily important, and the friendships that I've developed and had in sport. Some of them, and in fact, I met you, Ronnie, through sport, and you work closely with Greg, and Greg's an old friend for decades, actually, and what you guys do with Cartan Global and providing the opportunity for people to have this amazing experience. Like I said, every 4 years, right? That's the summer games. I'm more a summer guy than a winter guy because I'm skinny and I get cold. But no, but it really is something special. So you have excellence, friendship. I get asked by parents often about, does my kid have what it takes to make it, right? And they mean to make it to the Olympic team. And and they may or they may not. But what I try to tell parents is it's not about, that's not the end. That shouldn't be. This is a journey. The games is a journey. If you happen to make it to Tokyo or to Paris or to LA as an athlete, great. It's part of your journey. But it's not something that you will ever regret. You will have no regrets if you give this a try, if you put everything you have into it. So it's the pursuit of excellence, the friendships that you develop. I mean, I can, delve down into even further, in terms of there's an element of fair play. That's one of the Olympic values, is fair play. You learn to be, I would think you learn this at home from your parents, actually. They teach you to be honest. And, there was a book out once, I think, All I Ever Need to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. There's a lot of truth to that. Because you learn to make your bed, you learn to, wash your hands, you learn to say thank you, you learn to be a decent person. The fair play piece is an exponent of that. But I think the friendships that you develop is key. And if you take a look around the world, some of the challenges we're having in the world today, the geopolitical challenges, and we've had there's always, you pick the games, you pick the time period, there's always something, right, going on in the world. Sports was designed to help people understand each other, and we do. Like, for example, I know the U.S. and China at the moment are butting heads. Well, our Secretary General for the sport of pentathlon is Chinese, and she and I have a very close relationship. We get along very well. She understands, though she was born in the East, she understands the West very, very well. And I think it goes a long way. It speaks to what the movement is. But there's example after example after example.
Yeah, it's an example for like, in other words, like geopolitics, like you said, like in sport, they connect. Sport connects, and Like for example, like football, it's the most popular sport in the world. Like look at all the people that follows football in the world,
Wait,
and
football's the most popular sport in the world, and
like
not
soccer.
pentathlon? Are you sure?
Well, yeah, it's climbing up
Second
the
to
ranking,
pentathlon, maybe.
climbing up the rankings. I'll take you for that. It's maybe
Okay,
second.
okay. No, but you're right. You know, and you mentioned or rugby. You know, I mean, what Mandela did with the Rugby World Cup back, I guess it
Exactly.
was that '95, the '95 World Cup in South
South
Africa.
Africa. Yeah.
I mean, man, you know, Mandela was brilliant. It was a brilliant use of sport, you know, for to unite a nation and unite a people. Very much so.
Yeah, and he said, to quote it, as I said earlier, like sport unites, and he said that, and it's his sport is huge. Again, I mean, we can go over and over about many examples on this, but back to the Olympic Games and your experience side. So the Olympic Village is something that intrigues me and a lot of people. But any fun story that you can share publicly about the Olympic Village, about what's your experience there?
Well, USA Today, there was an article many years ago, and I love they said that I was arguably the most colorful Olympian, and by that they meant probably a character, but I had a
Right.
reputation. I enjoy having a good time. I like a good laugh. I that's how I like to live my life. So yes, I have many Olympic Village stories, but I know you're looking for. It's interesting because uh, Greg, who you work with, actually was involved in a number of these over the years. Not necessarily, he didn't know it at the time, but for example, in Barcelona in '92, they put the pentathlon team with the U.S. divers, and it was interesting. We walk into our rooms and I see, and it's like, you know, it's an apartment, right? You know, and you got individual bedrooms, and then there's like a living area, and there's U.S. diving, and the divers always had, you know, they were a good looking group of people, you know, and which is always nice. But I won't go any further than that on the divers, but I will say that the reason that they put us with the divers is we were going to compete first, and diving was later in the program, and they figured, they being Greg, by the way, that that when we finished, it would be like we'd be like vampires. In other words, we would be out partying all night and sleeping all day. So we would sleep all day, party all night. So that way, the two of us, the divers and the pentathletes, we would never see each other because the divers would be out all day and sleeping all night. Meanwhile, we're out all night and sleeping all day. So, I mean, there's a lot of thought that goes into the Olympic Village scenarios. I was trying to think of you know, something else that comes to mind that there was this anniversary just the other day. This in the last 2 weeks, I guess, the anniversary of the Seoul opening ceremonies in '88. We ended up that games, because the Koreans ran a very tight ship, and I had and again, if you're not Carl Lewis, or you're not in a big sport, or you're not a big name, you're always looking for how are your friends going to see you back home. You know, how are you going to, and so the opening ceremony is an opportunity where I can think in those games close to 4 billion people, you know, which is nearly everybody on the planet is watching the
Yeah,
ceremonies. It's amazing.
great.
So I spent the previous night making a sign, you know, and that sign ended up on the front page of the New York Times. And what the sign said was, "Hi, Mom, send won, W-O-N, which is Korean money, all right? But also the nickname of my girlfriend. So, hi, Mom, send won, go Texas," because that's the school I went to, the University of Texas, and the NBC logo. Well, now I'm a veteran. All right, it's my second
So
games,
if we
'88.
Google that, can we find that online? Your
Oh,
site?
I'm sure. I'll have to send you a picture for because I've got it, because it just came up the other day, and I had to. So I was out in lane number 1. When you march into the ceremony, you know, the track, you're on a stadium, right? You're a track and field stadium. So you're lanes 1 through 8, or 1 through, there's 10 lanes on the sprints, 8 lanes around the rest of the track. You know, the lanes on the outside is where the media is. That's where the photographers are, and you're going to get your pictures and all that. So everybody moves and tries to get there so they have a chance of getting their picture or the paper back home. In lane 1, nobody wants to be in lane 1, out on the inside, toward the inside of the track. Well, out in lane one was Carl Lewis, who was a big name in 1988. And so I stand behind him with my sign. I've got my sign over my head. You know, I'm carrying it up like this. Hi, Mom, send
Nice.
one. Good. And Carl is there, and he looks over his shoulder, and he sees the sign, and it doesn't say anything bad. There's nothing that, you know, derogatory at all. He just sees this kid with a sign. So he kept, and he was talking to NBC. He had his earpiece, and he was talking back to the, you know, he was talking to the world, you know, and well, that photo ended up all around the world and got me in trouble with the Korean organizers and the U.S. Olympic Committee because you're not supposed to do that. But I had a photograph of I took a picture before the opening, before we marched in the stadium, with the president of the Olympic Committee and that sign. I took a picture. And so that picture is what got me out of trouble, right? So wait a second. They knew that I had this picture, they had this sign. But that didn't help me with the Korean organizers. But in the New York Times article, what they said was the Korean opening ceremonies was a very formal affair, beautiful and all of that, but it didn't seem like a sporting event, except for that one American guy. They didn't have the name, except for that one American guy who had that sign, "Hi, Mom, send one," like something you would see at an American football match, you know, an American NFL game.
But that gets you, I mean, you wanted your buddies to see you back home.
Oh, sure. Of course.
You know?
Yeah, because we're not like professional, like the Tiger Woodses of the world, or these people that are on television every weekend at some major golf tournament. We get on TV every 4 years, you know, more or less in the sports. So yeah, so there's lots of and the village is everything that everybody thinks it is. You know, I mean, that is absolutely true. You put 10,000 athletes, and they've been very disciplined and you know, focused for years, and all of a sudden they're all together and they're in the best shape of their life, and then suddenly their event is over. And you know, are there Olympic Village romances? Yes, there are. That is a true story.
So it's not a myth then.
It is not a myth. Nope. It's a lot of fun. The villages are fun.
Oh, nice. Good stories. Thank you, Rob. Well, now you work as CEO of USA Pentathlon. How was your transition from an athlete to a sport leader, like an administrator, more on that side? How did that happen?
Well, it happened after '96. I had done the 96 trials. I actually tried to make the team. I broke my leg just prior to trials, and was kicked by a horse and had a bad fracture, and that kept me, eliminated any chance really of making the '96 team. But I did commentating for NBC, you know, and that kind of thing. I commentated for several sports actually. But
which other sports did you commentate for?
Equestrian. I worked with equestrian. I worked with fencing. I worked with, obviously, pentathlon. Those were my big three. But I had the opportunity in that every 4 years, national federations generally change leadership. So you get a new president. And so we elected a new president, and he called me. It was the late summer of '96, and he just said, "Listen, I'm looking for a CEO, and I'd be interested. You know, I'd like to know if you'd be interested in the job." And I was off in the San Juan Islands watching killer whales at the time, and he said, "I mean, who wouldn't want?" I felt like a baseball player who'd been in the game a long time, and suddenly the owner says, "How'd you like to manage the team? How'd you like to be in charge?" So who wouldn't want that, you know? So I was sure. He goes, "Great, you start Monday." This was on Thursday. Your first day is Monday. Whatever you're doing, quit, get back down here. You start on Monday. I'll see you at 8 o'clock Monday morning. So that's how it started. But there's the transition side, and to be fair, athletes today, you know, they have the challenges of, you need to have the longevity in the sport so that you can compete and have a chance to win, because there's some sports that are balanced to the younger, like gymnastics is a good example. They typically tend to be quite young, especially on the women's side.
Yeah.
But in a lot of sports, you know, the average age is, I want to say the average age is 27 or 28 years old now of an Olympian. And it's moved up there. So how do you have to be able to make a living. So they're always looking for ways to bridge the athletic, the athletic field, the field of play, and professional life. And the U.S. Olympic Committee has done a pretty good job, you know, in terms of creating programs to bridge that. But that's, for me, there's been a lot of, I've seen a number of athletes struggle. You hear about mental health. I guess I keep going back to that old Crocodile Dundee movie and about mental health. I mean, you just need friends to talk to. You know, I'm not sure how many psychologists you need, but you need a few good friends to have real conversations with to help get you through those times. There is that transition period, and for me, it was fairly short because I went from an active athlete to working in the same sport, you know, very directly. It was only a couple of months, you know, layoff where I was away.
It was 96 when you got appointed.
When I got the phone call, that's right. Right after the 96. It was late summer of 96 is really when it happened, and started then. And then I worked, you know, I did that for a quad, did some other things, but very much involved on the international side with working with the IOC alumni programs through the World Olympians Association. I mean, look, I'm a pentathlete, right? That's the sport that I do, but I drank the Kool-Aid. I love the Olympic Games. I love what the Olympic movement means. I love what it stands for. And for all the jokes that I tell and the good times and this kind of thing, I'm actually pretty serious about that, because I think it represents something that's so, the idea of the games back, you know, when 1894, when they were first blessed to say we're going to have the first games, if you could go to those guys, that original group of people, that original committee, and they could see what the games are today, I mean, I think you could say it's a job well done. There's all sorts of issues, right? But at the core, at the very bottom, you know, at the very base, as I've traveled around the world and I go to these out of the way places with very small, not a lot of resources, right? Not a lot of places that, not like the U.S. with lots of resources, and it's a machine. But the Olympic movement is alive and well in 207 nations around the planet, and it's a good thing. It's a very, very, very good thing, and I believe in that. And yes, pentathlon was my outlet. That was my path to get involved in the movement. But I'm not limited to that. I really, really did drink the Kool-Aid. I'm an evangelist when it comes to the Olympic movement, and that's one of the reasons why I think every human being, every person on the planet needs to have the opportunity to experience the games firsthand, because it's a life-changing, absolutely life-changing experience. Whether you're on the field of play, or whether you're there in the stands and walking around the town, you know, the host city. People always ask me, what were the greatest games? What do I think the greatest games are? The 16 games I've attended or worked in one capacity to another. For me, it was not in the United States. It was Australia. It was Sydney, Australia, the games of 2000. And they were extraordinary, and not for any other reason than it was the people. It was the people that were there. Volunteers, the community, they embraced it wholeheartedly. That was extraordinary. Yeah. And those guys know how to party, let me tell you. Aussies know how to party.
Yeah, I know. I spent a semester doing an internship, and yeah, it's a great country, and they do.
It is. It's a great country.
And Rob, so besides an athlete and an NGB administrator, like NGB, the national governing body in USA Pentathlon, you've been also part of the USOC Executive Committee. USOC is United States Olympic Committee, for those who don't know. And also you were the USOC Athletes Advisory Council. You were part of it. And also World Olympian Association. And you were telling me earlier as well, you were part of the UIPI. Can you tell those experiences, like how they help your professional growth, or how did you get involved?
Well, I think it's, you know, the United States being one of the 207 nations, one of the 207 National Olympic Committees on the planet, it's very hard to succeed as a sports politician as an American. You know, we have one International Federation president, which is David Haggerty for tennis. And you would think, when you take a look at the economics, you know, the commercial side, the Olympic movement, which is, as you well know, is massive, huge, and the American market is a big part of that. You would think, oh, there'd be a lot more Americans involved at the leadership levels of international federations and so forth. And one of the challenges Americans have is that we're American. We're viewed as the 800-pound gorilla in the Olympic movement. You know, there's a lot of money behind the sports in America, and that doesn't necessarily help us to win elections, because many of these administrative spots are elected. In fact, everything that I've held, I was elected to. So within the Athletes Advisory Council of the U.S., I was elected to the leadership group. It's just an elected position, and from there it puts you on the executive board. Same thing within my International Sport Federation. I was elected from my region, which is Norseca. And so what I pride myself in is listening to people. You learn to become a good listener. You learn to become, check your ego at the door. And you can't look at things through the lenses of your own country. You can't do that. I mean, there's so many Americans that look through the American glasses, and they get lost in the rhetoric of America. Believe me, I bleed red, white, and blue, and for sure, America's a day as long. But you have to look at it more from an international standpoint. What is it? Some of the issues facing the Olympic world today, for example, Rule 50. With the people taking a knee during the national anthem. The protests on the podium, which are big discussions at the moment. My personal opinion is it doesn't have a place, certainly not at the podium. That's just my personal opinion. However, I don't disagree, and I think one of the pieces that's missing is that the issues that affect the United States, in some cases, do affect the rest of the world, and in other cases, do not. Just like India, for example, has all sorts of challenges that we don't have, and you pick the country. They have their own set of challenges, right? So I think the IOC has done a great job in terms of how to manage that. And from an administrator's perspective, and I know you've had some people on this show, on your coffee talks, that have had to deal with that very directly and are actually in decision-making, positions. Like, for example, with Ivar Cisniega. Recently you had, with Pan American Sports, the Pan American Games, he runs those basically. So I think what it does is it opens your eyes and it lets you really understand that you have to look at things from a global perspective. And I think that happens in diplomacy. So if you have a job in for example, the United States, the U.S. State Department, you're a career diplomat, you learn those types of things. You really have to understand and try to empathize with the rest of the people in the world.
Yeah, no, that's huge, and it's not only in sport in general, as you said, like in the Senate, and it makes you see outside yourself, like you said, put your ego aside and look at one's perspective, and I think that's huge, and that's a great learning, and yeah.
Right, and when you're an athlete representative, you also have to remember why you're there. You're there, I've never been the president globally, but even a global president, their job is to represent the sport. Like if you're the president of pentathlon globally, your job with all the other sports is to represent the sport. Anita de France, who is the IOC first vice president now, and she's obviously an American and a long-serving IOC member. Anita told me many, many years ago, I remember there was some issue that came up where I think I said, Anita, you're an American. Why would you take this position? Why did you say whatever? I don't remember what the issue was, but I do remember I said, you're an American. And she said, you know what? I am an American. However, my role here is I need to check my American hat at the door. And I need to represent I'm a member of the International Olympic Committee. I'm representing the International Olympic movement. That's my responsibility. And I never forgot that. And then she was saying it was true. What she was doing was the right thing, who she was representing. So whether you're an athlete representative or you're a sport representative or whatever it may be, you have a certain constituent group that you're responsible to. And so you also learn about that sort of thing. and you need to approach, generally, you learn a lot about compromise, how to make things work and how to get along. So, which I think it's another valuable lesson that sport teaches.
Yeah. No, wow, good stuff. Thank you, Rob, for sharing this. And well, I mean, it's we've talked a lot, and thank you for all this great conversation, Rob. And one last question that we wanted to ask you is so you know Greg Harney, that he works with as a consultant for Cartan, and he tells stories. And I just wanted to ask you, like, are all the stories that Greg Harney tells us about past Olympic Games true, or could be true? What do you think about that?
I think the stories that Greg tells are, I think that he lowers the volume. I think the reality is much greater than the story.
Okay.
So I realize that when he tells a story, we're generally getting the accepted, scrubbed version. Because Greg is, I can't say enough good things about Greg. He is. Oscar Wilde said one of the rarest things is to actually have lived as opposed to exist. And Greg has absolutely lived life. And one of the greatest compliments I can give to somebody is to say this of somebody, that they're a doer. They don't just say what they're. It's easy to say you're going to do something. In Greg's case, if he says he's going to do something, you can consider it done. He's old school, the kind of guy you don't need a contract with. It's a handshake and it's done. So I love the fact that they always used to say, like, he knows where the bodies are buried, because the reason is we probably put a lot of them there. But
he's one step ahead, and you're right. He's a doer. And,
he is.
You couldn't say it better. And yeah. Well,
now Cartan is lucky to have a guy like Greg Harney associated with the brand. There is no better guy in terms of living the Olympic dream. And there's an example of a guy who didn't compete on the field of play in the Olympic Games, but he is more of an Olympian than I am, in my opinion. He's a guy who lives it, understands it, believes it, and wants to share it with everybody he meets.
Yeah. There's a lot to learn from Mr. Greg Harney, but just a question that just anticipated.
Whether it's where the best restaurant is, or the best place to get a drink, or where the best view is, that he knows what I mean. There's a lot more to it than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you want restaurant recommendations, Greg will recommend you McDonald's, so don't ask.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen him do that. Well, Ronnie, you're doing a great job, and I appreciate the time to share some of these experiences.
I appreciate the time for you, Rob, and thank you for taking the time to share your stories. Always a pleasure to hear what you lived in the Olympic movement and what you learned and what you communicate, because it's really valuable, not only for people that are in Cartan and want to travel with Cartan or are thinking about going to Olympic Games, but for other people like me and our young professionals and young athletes. What you just said really resonates, and it means a lot. And thank you for taking the time to share this. And again, we hopefully I'll see you at some.
Well, I'm sure. I think I'd like to say one little thing, because particularly in the business that you're in, I think the Tokyo Games are going to be particularly special. I think they're going to be more special now. They were always going to be a special games, but I think they're going to be even have more significance now, coming off the global pandemic, off the COVID situation. I think it'll be under control. I think that this is going to. I sit in a lot of meetings, and this is the opportunity for the human race to show the universe that we're not going to be sidelined by. We will find solutions. We will find ways to put this forward, and that mankind will move forward. And if you have an opportunity to actually be there, present, the one opening ceremonies that I'm looking forward to, of all the opening ceremonies I've ever attended in my life, is the Tokyo 2021 opening ceremonies. I want to be there when that torch is lit, so I could say, you know what? As the human race pulled this off, we did it.
Really,
So, yeah.
Again, like as we mentioned before, Nelson Mandela, sport unites, and it's gonna come back to the world to unite, and
it's true.
hopefully be the case. And yeah, couldn't agree more. The Tokyo 2020 plus one games are.
Oh, that's right. 2020 plus one.
2021 as well. It's just, yeah. But anyway, thank you, Rob. Again, I really appreciated this, and pleasure talking to you. And for those who are tuning next week, it's the Paralympic special with Arly Velasquez, Paralympic skier from Mexico. So tune in, guys. It's going to be a good conversation as well. And thank you, Rob, again. Appreciate it. And we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronnie. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thanks, you too.